Everybody, and thank you for commissioners for attending and staff on a special meeting. Just a reminder that we are conducting this meeting by a teleconference pursuant to Government Code Section 54953. City Council adopted a resolution that confirms the statewide Office of Emergency continues to exist because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the Yolo County Public Officer continued to recommend measures to promote social distancing. The Commission and City staff are taking all actions required by the section to protect public access and right to comment. Members of the public are asked to watch on the live stream or by Wave Cable Channel 20. And to submit a comment in writing, hopefully you have emailed it already to the clerk at the address that is listed in the document. All comments received by 5 o'clock will be provided to the commissioners and posted on the website. Comments submitted shall become part of the public record of the meeting. If you'd like to make a verbal comment during the meeting, join using the Zoom link, which is on the agenda, or the phone number, which is also on the agenda. I will request public comment during item 1A prior to the first consent item on the agenda. Once I've announced the public comment period, if you'd like to make a comment, either raise your hand using Zoom or press *9 on your phone. And when it's your turn to comment, the clerk will turn on your microphone, call you by name or phone number, unmute your microphone, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Once your public comment has ended, your phone will be muted again. And so with that, we will turn it over to Nuvi for the roll call, please.
Okay, Commissioner Dawson. Commissioner Guerra.
Here.
Commissioner Kim.
Here.
Commissioner Olson.
Here.
Commissioner Singh. Commissioner Singh.
Yeah, here.
Thank you. Commissioner Thornton.
Present.
Chairperson White.
Here.
Alternate Commission Member Thomas.
Hello.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Excellent. So starting off with before item 1A, are there any public comments?
There were no comments from the public for this meeting.
Thank you. And then moving on to item number 2, consideration of the approval of the minutes. Hopefully everybody had a chance to review the minutes, and we'll need a motion and a second to approve minutes, please.
Commissioner Thornton, I motion to approve.
I second it.
All right, it is moved to approve the minutes by Commissioner Thornton and seconded by Commissioner Singh. Will you please take the roll call?
Sure. Commissioner Guerra.
Yes.
Commissioner Kim.
Yes.
Commissioner Olson.
Yes.
Commissioner Singh.
Yes.
Commissioner Thornton.
Yes.
Chairperson White.
Yes.
Alternate Commission Member Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the motion has been passed, and we're moving on to our regular special agenda item, which is considering Amendment 2 to the Community Development Block Grant of 2020 Action Plan. And Isaiah, before you start, I want to ask one question to make sure I am completely clear. Last time we met, we were talking about the next spending plan. Now we're talking about the past one.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Man, I had to read it 3 times before I went, oh, I see what we're doing. So I just want to make sure I was on the right page. Okay, so take it away.
Thank you, Chairperson White. So good evening, Chairperson White and members of the Commission. This evening, I'll be presenting information regarding a substantial amendment to the 2020 Annual Action Plan. The 2020 Annual Action Plan budgeted $458,217 for the Washington Neighborhood Improvement Project that fulfilled goal number 2, which was to achieve goals in the HUD Challenge grant funded Washington Realize a sustainable community strategy. So as previously noted, CDBG funded activities must comply with National Environmental Policy Act, known as NEPA. The NEPA review for the Washington E&F Street project was originally anticipated to be completed by November 2021, but due to prolonged cultural resource consultation, the NEPA review is not expected to be completed until early 2022. CDBG funds allocated to the Washington Neighborhood Improvement Project cannot be spent until the NEPA process has been completed. HUD requires entitlement jurisdictions to spend funds within a timely manner and has a timeliness expenditure test that occurs May 1st every year. So since there is a higher probability that the city will not meet its timeliness test in 2022, staff is recommending that the funds be reclassified to the Washington and Broderick Lighting and Safety Project. So as the commission may recall, the commission voted to approve an amendment to the 2021 annual action plan to reallocate funds for the North Riverwalk Trail Extension Project. And so this evening, we're recommending that we reallocate additional funds from the 2020 annual action plan that were originally allocated from the Washington E&F Street Improvement Project on to the Washington and Broderick Lighting and Safety Project. So the reason we're doing this because we want to have multiple activities to counter potential delays within expenditures. So moving forward, the Washington and Broderick Lighting and Safety Improvement Project will improve safety and driver visibility throughout the Washington and Broderick neighborhood by replacing and updating street and traffic lights, as well as security cameras. So this project meets the CDBG low and mod area benefit objective, and it will benefit low-income residents of Census Tract 101.01. So these funds will be primarily used for purchase of materials and installation. And an updated NEPA has been completed today. So if we do receive recommendation from the commission moving forward to the March 16th council meeting, as soon as it's approved, we can spend funds. So according to the city's citizen participation plan, reclassifying funds requires the city to substantially amend the 2020 annual action plan. And a 30-day public comment period was initiated on February 4th, 2022 through March 6th, 2022. And as of today, staff has not received any public comment. So in conclusion, staff respectfully requests the commission to provide any comments and vote to recommend that the city council approve amendment number 2 to the CDBG 2020 annual action plan. Raul and I are available for questions. Thank you for your time.
Any questions from the commissioner?
I have a question. This is Commissioner Thornton. Can you give us a little bit more detail or remind us where the funds are being taken from and what those funds were planned for?
Yeah, so originally the funds were being funded to the E&F Street project. So this is the Washington Improvement Project. I can share my screen. I can show you like an actual map of where it's. One second. Well, I'm sorry. Basically, the funds are being funded to the E&F Street project, but we're waiting on a monetary agreement with the tribe of this particular area, and it will be at least a month until we can use those grant funds, and we have to spend these funds within a timely manner, or we jeopardize losing funding from that from HUD for entitlement jurisdiction. So we'll be moving funds directly from the E&F Street and moving those funds directly towards the Washington and Broderick Safety Lighting Project. I have an image. It was a part of the attachment. It's attachment number 3. It was a location map that identifies where those funds were originally allocated towards. And then I have another map that shows an area of where we would potentially be implementing these safety and lighting fixtures.
Great. Is that on the ENF funds, are you guys planning to replace those funds at some point?
Yes.
Okay. How
Yeah,
is that going to happen?
So we currently have 2019 funds for the ENF street. So 2019, 2020, and 2021 were originally allocated towards the ENF street project. But we did substantial amendments to the 2020 annual action plan and the 2021. So currently this is the 2020 that we're doing allocations for. And then our goal for 2022 is to replenish those funds back to ENF Street for the next consolidated plan, or for the next annual action plan.
Thank you, Isaiah.
No problem.
And Isaiah, just so I understand too, because we talk about the same area, this different words. We were originally going to build sidewalks, and now we're going to put in streetlights in
Correct.
the same place.
And we currently still want to improve those sidewalks for ENF Street. It's just taken a while because we're in there's a monetary agreement with the current tribe, and we've been working with CPT capital projects and transportation. I always call them CPT. So we've been working with CPT as well as the tribe to get that monetary agreement, and that's been the holdup in that NEPA process. And until the NEPA is completed, that's when we can spend funds on this project.
Chairperson White, I can also elaborate a little bit more on that. You're correct. So the ENF Street project is the area between, or the block between ENF streets and 5th and 6th. So the sidewalk along that particular area are going to be installed. Currently, there are no sidewalks, in addition to lighting and other safety improvements. The new activity that is being proposed is actually for the entire census tract, for the entire neighborhood, not just that 2-block area. It generally encompasses all of Washington and portions of Broderick. So the lighting replacement and camera installment will take place at various locations throughout this census tract. So it is a larger area, but again, it's not. It only encompasses replacing street light and traffic light.
Thank you. That is very helpful. And Isaiah, I think the map that you're showing us right now is not in our package.
Yeah, the one that's in the package is for the ENF Street specific.
Yeah.
Which is within this. It's within this diagram, but this is a better visual to explain where the traffic lights can potentially be installed.
Yes, that makes tons more sense. I couldn't figure out how 2 streets of traffic lights were going to cost us almost $500,000. So this makes much more sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and I could send this all to you as well.
That's okay. Now that I can visualize it, yes, I was struggling with $500,000 for a block of streetlights.
Indeed, and apologies about that. And we're still in conversations with our capital projects and transportation staff to determine what specific street lights and traffic lights are going to be updated, but they are going to be in this general area that is shown on the screen right now. Again, this is the same census tract where this ENF Street project is. So we're targeting the same area. It's just, again, it's not limited to that one block of ENF 5th and 6th, but it's for the entire tract.
About how many, sorry, this is Commissioner Thornton, about how many stoplights does that cover? I know you don't know exactly where they'll be. Is it going to be 5, 10?
You know, I don't know, unfortunately, because it may be a combination of just replacing the actual, believe it or not, and I didn't know this, but apparently just replacing the light bulbs is very expensive. Updating them to the newer LEDs. So it's going to be a combination of just replacing some street light bulbs or updating them to LEDs, and then potentially updating some of the actual light. Again, we still haven't determined that with the capital project staff. We're still working on that, but we know that this is the area that is going to be benefiting.
So I have one question. So this new project, the Washington District Lighting and Safety Improvement Project, encompasses a bigger area. It's supposed to be done in March, correct?
So it will begin probably in March. And what we're trying to accomplish is get expenditures by May 1st so that we meet that expenditure milestone that CDBG has. So what we are planning to do and what we have discussed with capital projects and transportation staff is once we have approval from the city council on March 16th, we've already completed the NEPA process, which is the holdup on the ENF Street project. They can go ahead and start purchasing the equipment.
Okay.
And just the equipment alone will probably use up most of the allocation that we are transferring to this activity. The remainder of the cost will be for the actual installation.
Okay,
And
so
all
we
of
don't,
this-
yeah. So the project doesn't have to be completed. It just the money has to be spent.
That is correct. That is
Got it.
correct. So yeah, just to clarify, it's not completion of the project, but the actual expenditures that we have to make by that May 1st deadline.
Understood.
And as Isaiah has explained, unfortunately, our original activity, the ENF Street project, has seen substantial delays because of the significant cultural resources that have been found in that area. We're getting closer. We've met with our capital projects and transportation staff, and they've told us that they're getting very close to a monitoring agreement with the tribe. Once that monitoring agreement is finalized, then we can continue with completing the NEPA process, but it's still going to be at least another month and a half or so before the entire process is complete.
Thank you.
Carl, could you give us a really quick recap summary on what was happening with the tribe stuff? Were artifacts being found and they had to halt? Was that it? I couldn't remember.
Correct. Yeah. So significant cultural resources were found in the areas that were going to be disturbed because of the installation of the sidewalk and the lighting. What is happening right now is we're having to go back and reconfigure the designs so that we don't have to dig as far. And ultimately, I think that is where we're the direction that we're going. We're having to redesign the sidewalks and the installation of the light so that there's minimal digging so that we don't touch those cultural resources.
Thank you.
So I want to go back to streetlights for just a minute. I'm all for streetlights. Do you know if PG&E still does a rebate program for upgrading to LED streetlights? And if so, are we going after PG&E money for this?
I don't know. But that's something that we can let our capital projects and transportation staff know. I would assume that they would be aware if there are any rebate programs out there that they can also take advantage of. And one of the reasons why I also don't know the location of the lights that we are going to be targeting is because I think some of them are actually owned by PG&E. So they're actually looking at which ones are actual city assets and which ones are owned by PG&E. Once they determine that, then we can go ahead and identify those.
I have a question, Raul. So we are moving funds from Project A, which we submitted before that we're going to complete the street project that we, for one reason or the other, we cannot complete that. So we're moving funds from Project A to Project B, right?
That is correct.
Okay. So moving forward, next year after something, are we bind to go back to project A to complete it, or we can select other projects and we don't have a compulsion or a regulatory requirement to make sure that project A completed because that's what we started.
Yes. So as Isaiah mentioned earlier, we're currently in the middle of creating our 2022 annual action plan. If the commission recalls, Isaiah gave a presentation to the commission at the last meeting, just starting that process. One of the main activities that we are looking at refunding in this case is that ENF Street project. We haven't determined whether we are going to fund it in 2022 because we want to make sure that the NEPA is well underway. Because we're going to find ourselves in this situation again if we refund ENF with our 2022 money, but we're still trying to negotiate with the tribes and trying to complete NEPA. We're going to find ourselves having to reallocate the funds to another activity. We're hoping that between now and the time that we have to finalize our 2022 annual action plan, we will have a resolution on the tribal consultation and the monitoring agreement that we know that if we do allocate funds back to ENF, that project will actually move forward and we can spend those funds in a timely fashion.
No, do we have to, or is our discretion whether we go back or not? That's the question.
So we don't have to know. There's nothing that requires us to fund the project again.
Okay.
But we already, in essence, we have already started the project, and we still have 2019 CDBG funds in the project. So I think we would likely want to see that project completed. If not with CDBG funds, with another funding source that we would have to identify.
No, that I understand because we started the project, can't leave it in between. I was just asking for the regulatory requirements that we cannot dump the project A in between. We have to complete it, but it seems like we can move around and don't have to go back. That's a different situation that we want to complete it as a city or as
Correct. So we don't have to reallocate our 2022 CDBG funds. That's not a requirement. But because we still have our 2019 funds, we have to show that we have met our national objective. And the only way to show that we have completed that national objective is for that project to actually have been completed. So whether it's with additional CDBG funds or future CDBG funds or any other source, the project will need to be completed because we still have our 2019 CDBG funds allocated to that.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Kim with a question. First of all, thank you, Commissioner Singh, for your framing. I actually like that. Project A to Project B. I guess the question is, does the staff see like a potential Project C or Project D, other projects that it could have gone to instead of ENF? And if Project B, like what was the main criteria to have, chosen Project B over a potential Project C or D?
The timeliness of the project was the main factor. The fact that it was an activity that was eligible, it was in the same census tract, and that we knew that we could spend the money relatively quickly to make sure that we meet that expenditure deadline. Again, because we are only replacing existing or updating existing lighting. The NEPA is a lot simpler than if we're building sidewalks and digging, things of that nature. So the NEPA process is simplified quite significantly. So the ability to move the project forward very fast was one of the main factors why we decided to look at this particular activity.
Okay, thank you. So in regards to time frame, how many more projects could have been considered that might have been eligible because of the timing?
Wow. We met with our capital projects and transportation team to discuss what other activities they had going on at the present time. And this was the only activity that they were able to identify that could spend money that quickly. Primarily because just about every capital project and transportation activity requires a lot of time. There's a lot of procurement that needs to happen, soliciting, etc. And this particular one was the only one that they identified to spend money relatively quickly.
And my final question, sorry, here, is there a way we can leverage any potential like private development that's happening in this area to, leverage the $500,000 so that it can have greater than $500,000 impact when it comes to cost save on construction and all of the above by, strategizing collaborative, execution of infrastructure?
So typically when a new development is going to happen in an area, there's a requirement for them to do offsite improvement, like sidewalks and street lights and things of that nature. The areas that we're going to be targeting are areas that are already established. So it would be difficult to leverage private funding for that unless there's a program like Chairperson White mentioned from, say, a utility company that we could target. But in terms of other private development, because we are targeting existing neighborhoods, established neighborhoods, there isn't really at least not that I can think of off the top of my head, an opportunity to leverage private funds like that, like a new subdivision, a new development, an infill project, where they would be required to do most of these offsites and improve.
Thank you.
Seeing no additional questions from the commissioners, do we have any questions from the public or comments from the public, Newbie?
No, we do not.
All right, commissioners, are we ready to make a motion? Okay, our three options are to recommend that we approve this amendment, that we recommend that they do not approve the amendment, or we send them back to the board back to the drawing board and tell us to bring us a different project to approve. So I need it. I need I was going to say nomination. I need somebody to put that forward and a second, and make sure you say what you are putting forward, the motion that you're making.
Yep. Commissioner Kim, motion to recommend that the council approve the amendment 2 for the CDBG 2020 annual action plan.
Commissioner Thornton, I second that motion.
Okay, and our roll call, please.
Okay, Commissioner Guerra,
Yes.
Commissioner Kim,
Yes.
Commissioner Olson,
Yes.
Commissioner Singh,
Yes.
Commissioner Thornton,
Yes.
Chairperson White,
Yes.
alternate commission member Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, and now we are moving on, and I assume that's all of these folks that we haven't met before. Consideration of our membership in the California Housing Community Agency Joint Powers Authority.
Good evening, Chair White and commissioners. The item before you tonight, staff is seeking a recommendation from the commission to the City Council to join the California Community Housing Agency Joint Powers Authority as an additional member. So just for a bit of background, as is the case in West Sacramento and throughout the state, the housing affordability crisis is impacting households across various income spectrums. And even households earning too much to qualify for traditional subsidized affordable housing are often found spending a disproportionate amount of their income on housing costs. Membership in CalCHA would allow the organization to issue bonds within city limits to finance the acquisition of multifamily housing complexes that would be restricted to middle income earning households. So for a point of reference, to qualify for most traditional affordable housing rental units, a family of 4 in Yolo County must be earning below $74,000 a year, which is at 80% of the area median income. So CalCHA's middle income housing program would increase that income limit for a family of 4 to about $111,000 a year maximum. And that's equal to 120% of area median income. So joining as a member of CalCHA is still under consideration, and of course would still be subject to City Council approval. But staff is bringing the item before the Commission tonight as part of the standard Commission review process before any new housing program or activity is adopted. So it's staff's position that joining CalCHA would present another useful tool to the city to increase attainable housing options for all income levels. And with that, I'd like to introduce Allison Arnold with Catalyst Housing Group, who will be making a brief presentation and will be available for any questions the Commission may have.
Well, can everyone hear me all right? Great. Well, hello, Chair White and Commissioners. Thank you so much for having me. Big thank you to city staff as well, particularly Elijah and Raul. We've been working with them over the past number of weeks, months, perhaps, to review the program and bring this proposal before you today. I will go ahead and give a bit of background, and then again, as Elijah mentioned, happy to answer any questions you may have. My name is Allison. I'm the Director of Partnership at a firm called Catalyst Housing Group. We partner directly with CalCHA, the California Community Housing Agency, to implement their middle income housing program across the state of California. And thanks again for taking the time. As Elijah mentioned, anyone who lives in California knows we just have an entire group of folks that are increasingly defined as the missing middle, folks who generally earn too much to qualify for traditional forms of affordable housing, yet find it more and more difficult to live within the communities that they serve and that depend upon them. While there are programs today in California that do address households earning, very low or low incomes, subsidy programs that exist today, and there are market forces that provide, above market rate housing, there generally is no subsidy or motivation of any kind to produce this form of housing for middle income households. Seeing these challenges, we spent a couple of years with attorneys and bankers and governmental folks to try to figure out how to leverage what we did like about traditional affordable housing programs, namely tax exemptions and low cost of financing, but to do so in a more scalable and programmatic way. The culmination of those efforts was the launching of a new state agency called the California Community Housing Agency, or CalCHA for short. CalCHA is a joint powers authority and political subdivision of the state of California, and its sole purpose for existence is all about the furtherance of low and middle and moderate income housing across the state. Since its founding, I believe in January of 2019, we at Catalyst have been partnering with CalCHA to go acquire existing market rate multifamily apartment communities and then rent restrict them to households earning no more than 120% of area median income. To date, there are about 33 cities, counties, and housing authorities across the state that have joined CalCHA as members, and they will have soon closed on more than 4,000 units of this form of housing. How the program generally works is that CalCHA, as a joint powers authority, issues its own governmental revenue bonds to finance the acquisition of these apartment complexes. The projects are then 100% debt financed by the issuance and sale of CalCHA's own bonds, and then backed solely by the revenues generated by the project. City of West credit enhancing the bonds, issuing them, not backstopping them. We're not diminishing your issuing capacity in any way. In addition, these aren't your traditional private activity bonds that are traditionally used in affordable housing. So we don't need to apply for an allocation of those bonds and take away subsidy that does exist for deeper affordable housing programs that exist today. And with the right local approvals in place, as Elijah mentioned, CalCHA is able to issue these bonds locally, and we do not require any subsidy from our municipal partners. As a governmental entity, CalCHA, when it takes direct ownership to these apartment communities, qualifies for a by right property tax exemption, which is similar to how the city of West Sacramento would not pay property tax on its own city hall just by virtue of the fact that you own the building. It's these property tax savings, along with the pretty low cost of financing that we're able to access, which allows us to be competitive in the open market to acquire these apartment communities, but then take those savings to reduce rent for these middle-income households. A regulatory agreement is recorded at the property, and generally, CalCHA sets about a third of the units at 80% AMI, a third at the units at 100% AMI, and then that last third at 120% of area median income. It's worth noting that that is flexible. It's not very prescriptive. We can work with the city to sort of target the income parameters that you all are most highly focused on. Ultimately, the gating issue on our end is just making sure that the project is financeable, but it is flexible in that way. Within the regulatory agreement, there is a non-displacement clause for existing residents, which we think is important. You know, these are existing apartment communities. And then rents for qualifying households are capped at no more than 4% annually, which is well inside of California rent control these days, if I think AB 1482. And finally, you know, to access the powers of tax-exempt financing, CalCHA really has to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that it is creating and generating meaningful public benefit. And that benefit has to be documented to live with the public, in this case, the city of West Sacramento. The way that we do that is in a couple of ways. You know, first and foremost are the tangible rent subsidies that we're able to provide for moderate income households, but then also all of the surplus cash flow and ultimately the embedded equity and control of each CalCHA local project locally would be granted to the underlying jurisdiction, you know, in this case, the city of West Sacramento. And I'm happy to spend as much time on that if anyone has any questions. But one way or another, we really must document that all of the financial upside has to live with our municipal partners. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you again for city staff's time and efforts in working with me on this. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions. We're hopeful that this structure is of interest to the city in the hope that we might be able to bring a live opportunity to you in the future. Again, that might be something worth noting. There is not a project that we're looking at live, but just interested to share the program structure with you in the hope that it's a useful tool to you and your city. So I am here for any questions. Thank you so much.
This is Commissioner Thornton, and this sounds like a great program. And so you mentioned, Allison, and thank you very much for your presentation. If you mentioned that you guys don't have your eyes set on any apartment complexes or other housing units in West Sacramento at the moment, you guys haven't done any research on that?
Thank you for the question. To be clear, we definitely have looked. We think that there would be opportunities locally. Generally, in order for us to be able to actually move forward with a specific transaction, there has to be a sort of trifecta of perfect scenarios. You know, first, the city is able and willing to join CalCHA as a member. That's really the first step. That gives CalCHA the authority to issue bonds. And so really, going back to my first train of thought, we really have to have a willing city partner, a willing seller, you know, willing to sell us the property, and then be awarded the property ultimately. So it can be a little bit of a chicken and egg scenario. Sometimes we present to cities like this where we don't have something tangible in front of us today that's under contract, but we're always looking and, you know, would be eager to bring something back. On the flip side, sometimes we have something live that we then bring to cities, so it can just depend on each individual circumstance.
Great. And can you really quickly summarize again how that process would work? Say that you were able to find a, you know, multiple family housing unit, and you guys would go. Is it correct? It might not be that the owner of the property is looking to sell, but you guys might go and chat with that person, see if they'd be willing to sell. If they are willing to sell, can you walk us through the process of what would happen for the tenants that were currently in that apartment complex or building?
Yeah, definitely. say that the city was interested in joining the Joint Powers Authority, the city council at its pleasure decided to pass this resolution included in your packet. We would start looking at local opportunities as you referenced. Authority is usually given, and I believe is the case in this resolution as well, authority is given to city staff to enter into these specific agreements if and when there is something live. So we would come back to the city and say that there was this opportunity. If that was of interest to you, we would be able to move forward, which would be great. As you mentioned, we are looking at fully operational multifamily apartments across the state of California. So there is an existing tenant base that lives there today. We qualify households upon lease renewal. So to the extent that there was a household that lives in the property today, we would ask them upon lease renewal for their household size, household income. A lot of the times we find that they often qualify for one of the income buckets within the regulatory agreement. So we're able to roll them into the program, which is really exciting. To the extent there's someone who lives there today who is over income, earns above that 120% AMI threshold, they're permitted to remain in their unit for as long as they like. There's no mandatory displacement at any time, but we would not be subsidizing that household rent. They would be, offered market rate rents. And then when they opted to move on their own accord, we would backfill that unit with a qualifying household. Again, so it's a little bit more of a natural conversion process, meaning intended to not have the displacement of folks, day one, which we think is an important public policy goal.
Great. So just to clarify, if the income limit was $100,000 and the Cal CHA took over this building and say the tenants that were currently living there have lived there for 10 years, making $120,000 a year, they would only be allowed to stay until their lease was up, and at which point then they would potentially, their rent would go up to whatever the market rate was. Did I understand that correctly?
I think it just depends on every single person's individual lease and what this is, all very individual and specific. Generally, people are paying, landlords are sort of interested in having people pay market. So a lot of the times folks are, paying what that figure is to live there, right? Especially if they moved in recently. Usually
Right.
What we see is that folks have lived there and they're sort of paying 40, 50, 60% of their income on rent. And so we're able to offer them a rent reduction, which is pretty great. It is possible that the transition to market, you would see an increase, but again, it would be limited by market factors. But yeah, that's correct. The over income tenants are not offered the rent discount under the program. But they're permitted to stay. We're not looking for them to leave their lease, and incentivize. We just don't want to incentivize them to stay either. We want to have this natural turnover of units to the affordability buckets that are within the regulatory agreement. So it's definitely a balance.
Historically, I'm sorry if I'm bombarding.
No.
Here.
No, I like it.
Well, this will be my last question. I'll let other people ask. So historically, how long has Cal CHA been around?
I believe that they were founded. Excuse me if that's not an actual word. My apologies. Founded. Okay, I was like, is that real? I believe they were founded in 2018, and since then they have closed on, I want to say, close to 4,000 units. We at Catalyst have worked with them on most of their portfolio of these middle income housing programs. They do work with other folks in the space as well, but that's definitely scaling across the state.
Okay. And so in that time period, what percentage would you estimate, if you don't know the exact number, of people that once the building or apartment complex was acquired ended up moving out when their lease was over due to either being overqualified? I guess just being overqualified. What percentage of people ended up moving because of that reason? And that's
no worries. I love this. I'd probably have to check in with our operations lead to get you something concrete specific to the portfolio. I know generally the assumptions that we're working off of, I should say, are that we've seen in these large institutionally sized multifamily apartments, there usually is about 50% turnover of tenants annually, which, is sort of surprising, but actually the data proves it, which I found when I started pretty surprising. I believe that we've actually seen less of a turnover because often we are seeing those tenants that are living there today qualify. So it's not as significant, but I'm happy to circle up with our property management teams and our operations lead to get you some of those data points.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Allison, for your presentation. I have just a couple of questions. Once the property is acquired, who's the property manager and owner? Is it Catalyst?
The owner of the property would be CalCHA. They are the bond issuer and the owner. And again, that's really necessary in order to show clear governmental ownership, because ultimately it's that property tax exemption that allows us to buy down rent. So CalCHA would be the owner. We as Catalyst are the asset manager. So we partner with CalCHA and with third-party property management firms, usually Greystar or FPI, to do the on-site management of the individual properties. We have ongoing reporting responsibilities to CalCHA and to bondholders, and really are responsible for making sure that that regulatory agreement is being appropriately upheld by the property management firms.
And the bond to purchase the property, does it also include any improvements that need to be made for safety and energy efficiency and code compliance?
Yeah, it can depend. You know, every property has its own personality and history. So we have a team of experts that go and, you know, assess when the property was built, any deferred maintenance needs that may be necessary, and we build that into the bond issuance. But that's a great question. We definitely don't shy away from renovation needs. We think one of the really unique features of this program is, you know, we're able to provide some really unique preservation of existing affordable housing and sort of invest necessary capital where appropriate. So we build that into the bond issue. That was a great question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for great presentation. I'm so happy I heard this presentation. This is great. I'm so happy that this exists. I'm in a lot of different reasons why I think this program makes a lot of sense. One thing I'm realizing, though, is that I am not as familiar about bonds or how that all works as much as I should be. So I wanted to ask two questions. One about bonds, just for me to get a better sense of who's buying these bonds. So I'm like, what is that, the benefit and realization of that for whoever's buying these bonds? And then second, especially for new development, new construction, what environmental sustainability kind of criteria or constraints are using to guideline the development design so that we can lower greenhouse gas emission as much as possible? But to the first question, like, I guess who's like the main like for the 30 cities that are on board, like who's buying these bonds?
So that's definitely not a silly question. I do not have a finance background either, so you are not alone. I had to pick up a bunch of this information as on the fly. So these bonds are really sold to some of the largest muni bond investors in the country. And we've worked with Oric as our bond counsel and Jefferies to really market these bonds. And they're sold to folks like BlackRock, Invesco, Nuveen. I mean, pretty large scale firms. So there's a pretty strict due diligence process that goes into that, you know, making sure that there are appropriate contingencies and protections for bondholders. But it's a very highly institutionalized process in that way. To your second question about new construction, you know, I would think of this program primarily as an acquisition program to date, you know, where we're converting existing apartment communities into this form of, we call it essential housing, not quite affordable housing with a capital A, as you may have heard. It's been an acquisition model to date. We are actively looking to transition this financing mechanism to new construction. We think generally, you know, we're very excited about the acquisition and preservation work, but we would be very excited to create net new units for cities as well. But we just haven't quite gotten there. There's some, you know, challenges around prevailing wage and what that looks like. So unfortunately, we haven't been able to break ground on something yet, but we're actively looking at it. So I'd be happy to connect you, Commissioner Kim, with some of the folks on our finance team just to get a better sense of what those conversations have looked like. But it's definitely a priority of ours and I believe of CalCHA's as well.
Thank you.
Other questions from our commissioners?
Okay, I'm so sorry. I have one more.
No worries.
So one of the other things, I think in my mind, I'm worried, I worry about displacing people who may have been, somewhere for a long time, have great rental history, have a good relationship with their landlord, things like that. So that's one thing that it kind of comes to mind. I think this is a great program because I do agree that there is no help for middle income families. And a lot of times people, are overqualified when they actually really do need the help. So I definitely see the benefit in this. The only other question I wanted to ask is when you guys are looking at different properties, are you guys ever targeting, I would say, landlords that might be in a bad financial spot? Maybe COVID has got them down. Like I would want to feel confident knowing that, people, even landlords, aren't going to be targeted because they're having trouble paying their mortgages or things like that due to things like COVID or, whatnot. So
Definitely. I'm not on the acquisitions team. I can pretty confidently say that that's not really a part of the scoping process. Ultimately, I believe what the team is looking for is larger scale apartment communities. Because these are large scale bond offerings, there are some fixed costs associated with that process that unfortunately don't scale amazingly well across, mom and pop tiny apartment communities. The rental savings that we would have been able to have provided are sort of eaten up by the cost associated with issuing bonds. So it doesn't provide that necessary public benefit that we're looking to. So no, I don't think that we would be, perhaps there would be a scenario where there might be more landlords in the current climate that might be interested in selling. And, that would maybe provide a market that has more churn, but I don't think that's part of the acquisitions goals on our end.
I'm done now. Thank you.
No worries. I love the question here.
Nivi, do we have any public comment or questions? Okay, so if there is not additional comments from the commissioners, then you're certainly welcome to ask. I'm looking for a motion to either recommend to City Council that the city join CalCHA, or that we do not recommend the city join.
Commissioner Kim, like to make a motion for the city to join the CalCHA.
That we're recommending the City Council that they join.
Yes, we are recommending the city council to join. Thank you.
I second it.
Okay, and a second from Commissioner Singh. And Nivi, will you please do the roll call?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
And thank you so much, Allison, for skipping your dinner to talk to us. And I certainly appreciated your time, and I am going to do some investigation and learn a little bit more.
Wonderful. Well, again,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate the consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions that may come up, but thank you all again.
Great. Thank you,
All right.
Allison and Elijah.
Bye.
Appreciated.
And if the rest of you folks came to back up Allison, our feelings aren't hurt if you drop off. Although our meetings don't go till like 1 in the morning, so we're pretty lucky on that.
Just really
All
quickly.
right, so we are on to our final agenda item, which is any comments or updates from the commissioners and the staff.
Sure. I believe Elijah was,
I'm sorry, I
saying
couldn't
something.
hear you.
I apologize. I believe Elijah was saying something.
Oh,
Yeah, just really quickly wanted to thank the commission for coming together for the special meeting and for hearing the presentation tonight. So if there's no more, I will bid you farewell, and the rest of you have a great evening.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner White, just one comment, that we're talking about lighting and stuff like that. Not sure what process is involved and what's being looked at, but the Linden Loop sure could use some improvement in lighting.
I too live in the Linden Loop, Bernie, so hear ya.
I don't live there, but I go down there at night quite often, and pretty dark in some places.
Hey, over here in the State Street neighborhood, it is dark out here.
I, however, do want to give the city a big shout out for the new stoplight with the left turn signal on Merkley at Jefferson. Hooray, finally. So thank you. Been waiting 32 years for that turn signal. All right, Raul, do you have any staff updates for us?
Good evening. Thank you. Yes, and we can certainly let our counterparts at Capital Projects and Transportation about the street light request. We can gladly do that. Just one quick update. Katie did want me to let the commission know that the impact fee reform study that was presented to the commission, I believe, a couple of meetings ago, will be going to the council at the March 2nd meeting. So if you are interested in following how that presentation goes, it's on the agenda for the March 2nd council meeting. I know it's something that some of you have asked and something that we often get questions about. So that is moving along, and the council will be receiving a presentation on that. Other than that, we don't really have any other update. So that'll be it for now.
Okay, great. And without any other updates from the rest of our staff, we need a motion to adjourn, please.
This is Commissioner Guerra. I make a motion that we adjourn.
Commissioner Thornton, I second that motion.
And can we have one final roll call, our favorite part of the meeting?
Definitely. Commissioner Guerra,
Yes.
Commissioner Kim,
Yes.
Commissioner Olson, Commissioner Olson, you're on
Dan,
mute.
you put yourself back on mute.
Sorry, I logged out.
Okay.
Just say yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
For the love of God, say yes, please.
Commissioner Singh,
Yes and yes.
thank you. Commissioner Thornton,
What if I said no? What would happen?
we have
You'd be outvoted.
Yes, 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 please.
Chairperson White
Yes.
and alternate commission member Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. With that, we are adjourned. Everybody had a great evening, and thanks again for making time for this special meeting.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.